14.5 The Most Mysterious One, or My Love Corridor. From the Beauty to the Beast. This story is amazing. It is very tempting, but I will try not to spoil it here, my dear reader, as I did in my Juliet chapter. Be patient, please. This story will be more interesting than that one. I knew far less about her when I started writing this chapter than I do now. But she still hasn't stopped being the most mysterious woman to me. It was unbelievably nice to be loved by such a gorgeous woman. On our first dates with her, I did not even take off my wedding ring, and by the time our relationship was over, I was so absorbed by her that I completely forgot about my wife, with whom all the talk was only about our divorce, which she was not going to give that easy, and that I loved another woman, and who, on my constant insults and swearing at her, only asked me not to put my photos in my social networks with her. My wife still loved me. She cried, she did not sleep at nights, and I did not even feel sorry for her. I wrote this chapter at the very beginning of my relationship with Irka, when I was in my hormonal frenzy. I'll call it that. And I intentionally did not change anything. I want you, my reader, to feel my state and how it was changing in me all along. Here I will be more candid and more detailed with you than anywhere else, my reader, but even here I will not allow myself to write everything here. When I started this chapter, I didn't know that it would be the biggest chapter in this book, and that I would have my first idea of writing an entire book about her. This is my most emotional and enduring chapter. I promised not to spoil it, and I'm breaking that promise right now. I started out writing it as the happiest person in the world, and ended it as the unhappiest. While writing the chapter, at times I had the feeling that I was losing my mind, that I was getting really sick. This story probably left the strongest mark on my life, and may have changed me and my behavior forever. So rejoice and dread with me, my dear reader. There is the most beautiful chapter already in my book here. So this nomination I had already reserved for me. This mysterious girl in my class was considered one of the most beautiful girls in town. Well, she was not just a beautiful girl. She was a real wowie one. She had to be seen. It was believed that it was only her elder sister to be more beautiful, whose beauty went to legends in that town. I remember myself how eager I was to see her sister. It never happened. Not back then. But another girl, Marina, about whom I wrote above here, was more noticeable in that class. But Irka was much more mysterious. With this her bright Baltic appearance, she reminded me of some of the German and Swedish rock stars, very fashionable at the time. The first time I noticed her when she looked back at someone in the class, and right then I fell in love with her bright eyes and pronounced Scandinavian face. And her Polish Lithuanian poetically sounded surname, Narcissus. Much later, I asked her that Lithuanian girl's surname should sound differently. Yes, indeed. It should sound like Resergichute. But she lived in Russia, so it never changed. That year, after Indonesia, I finally was going to visit my mom. It wasn't meant to be my holiday visit, it was just my HR visit. And I asked my HR to book the ticket, not to my home at my place of registration, but my mother's place. So I could see my old and not very healthy woman, and they heard me. Although, frankly, I did not want to go there. not with the money I had on me and with the mood which never bounced back to normal after Indonesia. Especially with the beginning of summer that year, which was unusually cold and rainy throughout Russia. But something, probably it was my life experience, told me that just at such times I normally have unusual events. That's what the premonition I had. In 2017, for the 35th anniversary of our senior year, we managed somehow to get together, probably as the most complete team after school. Almost 2/3 of us had gathered. By the way, 5 boys from this class were gone by then. Well, that's how it all started. So, going to see my mother, I wanted to carry on like flirtation with an ex-sex icon and the best volleyball player in our class, that Marina. We wrote off. The idea to get together seemed to really please us, and she asked me to get to it. It's the 35th anniversary after all. Well, that would be an even more meaningful occasion for me to see her. So I took up this. This meeting, in fact, was arranged by Oleg, a trucker working abroad and a joker who was always like that since school. And I was only helping him. Yes, I was sure that if I fooled around with someone in our class, that would be Marina. I had somehow communicated with her. With Irka, however, I did not communicate at all in our class, really. Neither in the classroom nor after school, except for a few phrases that we exchanged for 3 years at the school. My days began to be melancholy at my mom's. I went to the neighboring resort towns, drank mineral water, sometimes helped myself with some vodka in the evenings and took hot baths. Met some relatives, went with my mother to our dacha to help her to harvest, and dealt with some other insignificant things. I drank alone since a friend of my childhood no longer drank and constantly called me to join him in the gym instead. I prefer to drink alone. I do not have interlocutors with whom I would like to talk. But I was at the funeral of my childhood's friend's cousin, whom I also knew well and who had turned out to have an affair with my sister a long time back. I found my classmate Sveta, who did not want to share a desk with me at school, and we met up in the yard of her place. First, we had some ice cream, remembered our school years. Now I felt her obvious liking for me. We went to the Irish pub where we had some beer, mingling with the football fans, and agreed to arrange a preliminary meeting with Marina and Oleg to discuss some organizational issues for yet another more grandiose class reunion event. By phone calls and correspondence, it was clear that Marina wanted to meet with all of us. Irka on that day had to go to work the swing shift, but she said she would go to us on her way to work. During the meeting with Sveta, Irka's school friend, I remembered Irka several times to probe something about her. Sveta remembered how they went to Sakman to guide the flock of ewes with lambs of the same age together, where she met her future husband. She was one of our first, like Sveta and Marina, married, without reacting in any way to my idea that it would be nice to see her then as well. Right before going to see them at our next arranged meeting, for bravery I helped myself with a shot or two of vodka. The 4 of us have gotten together. Oleg and Marina both were driving, so they didn't drink, and the only 2 of us, Sveta and I, were having some vodka and snacks. The rest just had their dinner and some fun. We were sitting outside at that pub again. "Here comes Irka," Marina said happily, and Kim Bessinger sat up right next to us. Damn, it was really good to see her. I admit that the first few seconds I saw her to have gotten older. We were all 52 years old at the time, but my brain immediately turned on the Photoshop Nero filters, and you see, she was still the same. A little detached and elegant, and looked spectacular. The Western European kind of a woman. She wore a spotted overall, Maybe a bit too flashy, but it gracefully emphasized her almost well-preserved shape. Well, she had too much cosmetics on her face to my taste. She was way too good for any makeup. We are all smart in the hindsight, and now I think that I, the fool, having seen her in a leopard skin jumpsuit and with such a layer of makeup on her face, she was carefully preparing and jumpy. She'd only need some tattoo on her arms to complete her picture. Had to get up and run away, but no. With Photoshop turned on in my brain, I was looking at my lovely Irka from the 10th grade. Our eyes met several times. I ordered her some ice cream, constantly stealing glances at her. Irka kept looking at me without any smile, somehow mundane and businesslike, took a few pictures of me. She had to go to work, and before parting we photographed together on her phone, and I carefully put my arm around her waist. That's what Irka later told me. I did not remember anything about myself hugging her. I forgot about Marina the moment I saw Irka. These moments and these shy glances decided our destiny. She went to her work and we continued partying. Then we decided to call on Anatoly, another classmate whom I had not seen for at least 28 years. The whole evening I had a fine mood. At Anatoly's, whose wife was very nice to us, we drank some tea with a cake and animatedly discussed our school photos, which he kindly provided to us. Many of these photos I did not have, even those I took back then, so I scanned them to my phone. I received to my WhatsApp her selfie pictures with me standing by. I wrote, "Thank you, we are at Thales." Irka asked me to say hello to him for her. That's how it all started. And it started enchantingly. It started so enchantingly dynamic that I now involuntarily put myself on hold to think a bit on how should I write about it to convey that magic mood and atmosphere of all this, to keep you suspended, but probably with too many details delivered. And they will be delivered. Sorry, couldn't help it. Before our big class reunion meeting we had some of our own with Irka, our dates. We had to. They were a bit unexpected for us. Unexpected was the passionate kisses that have been waiting on the wings for us since the age of 16. And we still did not know anything about each other. She still was that 16-year-old girl of my dreams to me. Our deferred and secret passion just kept waiting for their time and finally broke loose in a hurricane. After our first date, I sent her poems with a confession of love at the end. Irka was touched by it, and she confessed that she felt she was falling in love with me too. A woman who had 2 grown-up sons was about to know the first love in her life ever. The situation was greatly aggravated by the fact that the day of our first date occurred on the day of my wife's arrival. She was missing me as well. And of course my secret dates with Irka wouldn't go unnoticed for long. The first storm was approaching. Every new meeting brought so many new and inexpressible feelings. We quickly replenished for our lost time and feelings for each other. I quickly recalled my long forgotten feelings I had since my love affair with Ellie. According to her, I was her first man to whom she, the dream of all the boys and men, felt love, first in her lifetime. I'm trying to remember now, wasn't it the second time I saw her that she reached under my shorts and grabbed my erect dick? One thing I do remember for sure is that for some reason I wasn't surprised by it. I rather was expecting it from Irka. Why? At that Jubilee class come together in a banquet hall, I naturally sat next to Irka. My hands were on her knees all the time under the table. I couldn't help it. Our powwow started well. With the collective photo at the threshold of our school, once the most advanced and modern in the town back then. And our class was the first in this school to go from the first to the last grade. From the first minutes I was having showers of compliments from everyone, both males and females. It was nice, I admit, to hear this from the former silver spooners and beauties. In the hall, we were the only dancers with Irka, and it all became clear that we were seeing each other for a while. And I was also singing karaoke like a nightingale, some popular hits in English that some even went out to dance along with me singing and ended my songs with applauses. And Irka was standing next to me, puffing up with pride, like a mother for her son in the school play. Even the restaurant owner personally went out to listen to me. I was the star in the group there, and girls unceremoniously pulled me away from Irka to have a dance with me, especially that Marina, the best volleyball player in class. Sveta, the same Sveta that in the young years at school, who did not tolerate me so much that she wouldn't want to sit down next to me at the desk, as our form teacher required, and who now kept kissing me on my cheeks with her closed eyes all along. Sveta sat next to me at the desk back then after noon recess. Irka spoke with Sveta on the recess. What would it be like for you, she told her, if you were in his shoes and nobody would want to sit down with you? I have never liked Sveta myself from the very moment I saw her when I was 6 years old. She was brought for hospitalization to a place I was in, and she did not want this and fiercely fought back to her dear mama, screaming and crying and tearing herself back. For some reason I did not feel sorry for her. And I also thought she was very big then. And Yura, that arrogant Yura I wrote above, who only wanted Irka to share his desk with, and when he was denied by the class teacher, he stayed alone in his desk. The only student in the class. That's how he liked her. Yura, by the way, never got married. Irka joked that she had nothing to do with it. Remember him, right? Yurka loved all the West European things, and he not very angrily, but the first at the evening commented out loud on our suspicious inseparability. He had always noticed that, at a school party, I somehow dared to invite as slender as a witty blonde girl to dance, and he, dancing with the other girl, winked at me as if to say, "Just look at you, you timid boy." Now Sveta was loudly grumbling at Irka that she had occupied me, and because of that no one else could dance with me. That's not fair. Once a tough Komsomol leader, Lena, pinning me in front of the class with a class teacher alongside. For my poor school performance, for my long unkept hair, now openly called me handsome. There at the party and later in social networks. Could I ever dream of that? People, please do love each other. Whatever happens, no matter. Keep loving. And try to marry for love. Let this love pass, and it will pass anyway. No doubt about that. This is still better than to never have it before. No passing for judgment for good or bad, I'll be honest with you. I always fell in love with beautiful appearances first. Beauty is an indicator of health one way or another. Irka was no exception, except that Irka was the rare case that she could be loved for her personality alone. I'll dwell on that aspect later, but first, she attracted my attention with her beauty. I thought she was too beautiful for me. I put her on such a pedestal I was frightened to approach to. At the same time, I always felt the warmth coming from her towards me. I remember her studying glances, which I then perceived as pitying me, and how I dodged her piercing eyes. All the microscopic dialogues with her at school were on her initiative, but I could not even answer her without embarrassment, and I never did. I was embarrassed by the only worn-out jacket I had bought with the social welfare office for me. For her beauty I would forgive her any bitchiness, which she never had, and I was very good at running to beaches. I never saw any angry or fears in her. I remember her smiling all the time like Samantha Smith, USA Goodwill ambassador in the early 80s. She always had her inner confidence and strength, and she stayed like that. It keeps blowing my mind just thinking that the most beautiful woman, the dream of any man, the woman who had boys younger than her sons fall in love with her, the woman to whom when she was a young school graduate was approached by some local power broker and offered her a secure life in a cloudless future if she only agreed to marry him. A woman whom I desperately and hopelessly loved myself since school, who, just like that, falls in love with me. To understand me, you have to picture her. Well, she was like Forrest Gump, only smart, and beautiful like Jenny. You get it, don't you? Irka told me a funny story how once she was invited to the theater by one handsome but impudent 20-year-old man when she was 40. She thanked him for that, but told that she was too old for him, was she not? To which he replied, "What do you mean, too old for me? Am I going to chew you or something? As you have already understood from my book that I am sick all over my head, but it was with Irka that I quickly began to recover, to become an increasingly normal person, which I had never been since probably my early childhood. We kept seeing each other. After that reunion party we had, we managed to see each other each late afternoon. As teenagers, we sat hugging in the dark in a gazebo in an abandoned park. We would take a taxi and leave for another town or a mountain forest, where no one interfered with us in the dark. And what was surprising, I was afraid of nothing with her around. I would never have landed alone in the woods at night. It's amazing, isn't it? During such meetings we had passionate kissing and we did to each other hand jobs. I remember her abounded wetness for the first time down there. She was always shy about her abounded wetness during sex and often would interrupt it to wipe it there. She shouldn't have. I liked it. And even sex on the move, constantly reaching to suspicious rustles. One was particularly memorable. It was on a moonlit path in the middle of an abandoned construction site when she hurriedly took off her pants and quickly bent at her waist to let me in, and I almost lost my cap, which we had trouble finding it later. Irka prepared well for such dating. She always had with her hygienic wet wipes and bottles of water. It was romantic, all right, but it didn't feel right. It wasn't real sex. Our first full-blown and very crazy sex happened in her apartment. I will never forget that, my first visit to her, where she waited impatiently for me, nervously chain-smoking in her white shirt, thrown over her naked body. There was nothing sexier I have ever seen before. I was choking with delight hugging her. Irka asked if I was hungry. I was saying something about not caring at all about being hungry with her around as she resolutely led me into her bedroom, so resolutely that I got terrified. "Will you have some cognac first?" she asked, clearly feeling it. Sure. I needed some drink. My heart was jumping out of my chest. Irka was a fine fellow. She was quick and delicate at making the right decision. I was running late again as Irka waited for me in her shirt. You remember that my wife came to visit me and I always had to think up some good excuse to go away. And we could not afford to lose a minute, and we lost nothing. Our dates were unforgettable, very tight in time and so romantic. She was fantastic in bed. She was even better in her shower cubicle. There were seas, oceans of love in her. Could I ever dream about it? After the second sex in her shower, back again in her younger son's bed. She bent my back to her to place it more comfortable for her. She began to kiss my anus, simultaneously jacking my dick incessantly, until I came for the third time. Her fantastic and tender kisses gave me goosebumps running all over my body, and my third orgasm was the most penetrating, the longest. It felt terribly good, and I, for some reason, was not surprised by everything Irka was doing. It suited her just right, just right. She was incredibly beautiful in the process. Without makeup, that adorable Irka from the 10th grade was looking at me again. Well, hello, my Irka, my dear, my little angel. It was then that I first noticed the little birthmark on her lower eyelid that got lost under her thick lashes. I'm sure no one else in the class knows about that hair mark under eyelashes, I know. I felt young again. Indeed, one never really knows his limits. We're now eating in her kitchen. So many foods and they're so different and so delicious. Stewed meat with mushrooms, fried chicken with vegetables, ice cream with chopped chocolate, cognac. I was hungry now. I would eat and immediately forget about food whenever I looked at her. She was standing by the window in her shirt, smoking a cigarette. You eat, she is bringing me back out of trance I was in. She, embarrassed, turned back to the window, still feeling me openly staring at her slightly wide knees. Whenever I touched her, the goosebumps would instantly show up on her hands, her neck, and everywhere. I've never seen this before. She had no time to finish her cigarette. I loved her. I loved her liberated sexuality and couldn't believe that. That couldn't be true, what was going between the two of us. And it just rained outside the window. It was so green and clean, and the birds were singing so juicy and sweet. It was July. It has always been uncomfortable for me to lie to anybody, but I have never been so cynical and believable like that before. For my next date with Irka, I told my wife that I would be at my classmate's place to give him some photos I took at that meeting. That I might stay there and might have some drinks. We are all friends after all. We had a sparklier, crazier, and even more exhausting date this time, with fantastic foods in her kitchen again at breaks. We again had some cognac. I needed it this time for a smell. I am at classmates, remember? We drank a lot, but neither of us got drunk, and my girl was going to work that night. After I left Irka, I called and met with a classmate, brought him some drink and took him to my place. On our way to my place, I instructed Sergei that all this time I was with him. You had a good time, hadn't you, with Irka Researchus? He said with a smile. I stopped short with surprise. You understand, right? I've been to your place. Of course, no questions. And I smiled. Everything was written on my face, no doubt about that. Oh, what a fun we had with us. I didn't have such a thing even with that beautiful Ellie almost 30 years before when I first fell in love with such a dizzying state. And it was with her that I realized that even though the girls loved me, they never did it as much and so truly as Irka did. All the love she had unspent in her life, she poured it fully on me. What can I say? With this amazing woman, if you will, I had nothing to dream of. And I have finally settled, calmed down. I figured out what was wrong with me. I always believed that things like this would never happen to me. Now I knew for sure if we started dating with Irka at school, if we got married, I would never cheat on her. We talked a lot about this with Irka. Before her, I was short of sex all the time. Probably partly because of this, I lived with my wife, with a woman I never loved, but who loved sex in almost all its forms. And with Irka, I felt that I finally found someone who started to meet my demand with sex. And I eventually have become a normal person in this respect. I got everything with her, and I had nothing to dream further about. Even literally. With her, we tried everything we could. I mean, we have tried everything with her that we hadn't yet done by the time we both were 52. I don't usually allow excessive naturalism here, I'm sorry. I was so in love with her that I still find it very difficult to keep myself in line writing all this. In retrospect, she and I are in the shower after yet another sex. I densely soap up my panties. She never tried this before. She opens her mouth and almost cries out in pain, but immediately rolls her beautiful eyes up in bliss. Everything new with her was even better than I had imagined in my fantasies. After that, she walked around brooding, came up to me, hugged me, and with a smile said, "You wormed your way into my good graces." I looked at her and thought, God, how beautiful she was. She told me later that she felt every moment I was coming in there. How richly innervated that part of her intestines must be to feel that, and to what degree she must be in love with me to enjoy it. Oh, another one. One day we are having sex with her, the second one in the shower again, and we hear a persistent knock on the door. It turned out to be her younger son coming home from work. He's sick. I panic. I'm afraid of him. He is the last of her relatives to accept me, and a few days before that he, drunk, kicked me out of their house, and now he's very ashamed of it. And here he is again. He understands everything about what was going on, of course, but feeling guilty about it, he's very polite to me this time. He goes to his room and never comes out again. We resume in her room now our interrupted sex. She gives me a blowjob. Irka, I say to her, I'm about to come in your mouth. Maybe I shouldn't. So what she says, as if it's nothing to her. I have never come in anyone's mouth before, except accidentally. She was open to everything with me. That's how she loved me. When we parted, we'd immediately start our correspondence. We missed each other the moment we parted. We discussed our sex and what each of us felt in the process, how many times we came, etc. We were waiting for our new sessions and thinking about what else we should try. Blindfolded sex, handcuffed sex, combining it with sex toys she had. There was no limit to our fantasies. We had our inside jokes now. For example, about 69% charging on my or her phones. We took pictures of everything, prices, discounts, anything with the number 69, and sent them to each other with our humorous comments. Those numbers indeed were very common to us by then. I didn't even think about how much she could do and how well she did it, all for a woman who had no one but her husband, whom she didn't love before me. I didn't think about it then. After all, she was 50 years old, and it was strange not to be able to do it all at her age. And somehow I didn't think at all about the fact that she had divorced him 12 years before she met me. In our class, there always were at least 3 who envied me that I was seeing Irka. There would have been 4 of them. The 4th died in 2008, whose funeral I was also at. I had just buried my father before that. It was Yura Pavel, once an A student whose life did not work out too good for him, and who began to hit on Irka at our class reunion, until he figured he was late. This Oleg, the sea captain, even in his white captain's jacket in a photo, he never went to his mother's house in that jacket though. Maybe he should have at least once. He didn't look like a brave captain at all, who was in love and still secretly is, I believe, with her at school. Oleg lacks the generosity a real captain should have, and women did not like him. That explained his constant and miserable drinking with dumplings or fried potatoes for chaser at his mother's on holidays and his evil nature. I told him when we drank that with Irka I no longer had anything at all to dream about. Imagine how it was for him, the sea captain, deeply insecure in his mind, to hear it. Perhaps it should be disturbing when there were so many jealous men in one place. But for the time being, it didn't disturb me at all. First, I trusted Irka. I felt she loved me. Second, I could handle them all. We had a lot of mystical things with Irka, even the fact that her father, whom I resemble a little bit, died when he was 52 years old. Irka and I met when I was 52 years old too. And also, it never ceased to amaze us that, living all the time close by in a small town, we managed not to meet with her all this time. Probably the higher forces decided for us that the time had not come for us yet. Now this time has come, I believed. Remember when I wrote about our approaching thunderstorm with my wife? She had already noticed my frequent hang-ups on my smartphone, but I had plausible excuses saying that I was communicating with my classmates, which was understandable. They all missed me and I was the star at our meeting. She should have seen me singing karaoke in English. The owner of the place himself came out to see me singing. And then at night I was nervously waiting for my wife to go to bed, but she wouldn't go. She kept messing about. It used to piss me off about her before, but then, right? My Irka was waiting for me sitting at her friend's house nearby, who also couldn't wait for her to leave, but she didn't. Finally, my wife seemed to quiet down, and I quietly slipped out of the house. We met on a bench under a dense tree and kissed. I told her that she should wear a light dress for a date like this for once. It was very inconvenient for me to get down there in her tight pants she wore. She didn't like dresses. My daughter doesn't like them either, by the way. They had a lot in common with my daughter. I quietly unlocked the front door, got my shoes off, and began to quietly make my way to my room, just as my wife called out to me. I froze. Was she awake? Didn't she sleep? Where have you been? A horrible scandal ensued, and my mother came out to the noise. I texted Irka that there was a hurricane inside our house. I don't even remember how it ended and what lies did I tell her this time. And then finally our first serious parting came. On the day of my departure, we arranged to meet in our town park. She was right after her night shift. I offered her to make love right then in the park among the bushes. It was morning. There weren't that many people here yet. She didn't dare. She said she was after her night shift in the hot shop and there were no showers. I didn't insist on it. We sat on the bench instead, kissing and taking pictures on our phones, and she kept hugging me. She wrote me later that she almost cried then, and she never cries. She normally feels like a man. I told her back then that I remembered it and I didn't notice it, to be honest. I felt that she loved me, that it was hard for her to say goodbye to me, and I decided at that point that for my next weekend in 3 months I would come to visit her. I told her that to make her feel better, to give her some hope, and I had yet to fall in love with her. I don't remember how long we sat in the park, an hour or two, but I had to go. I still had some shopping to do. We said our goodbyes. She held on very bravely, not far from my home. I was buying something at a kiosk, and across the street I saw her again. She was talking to a woman, but she kept looking at me. And lo and behold, she was near me again. "Hello again," she said. "Hello," I replied as affably as I could. It was impossible to look at her. How she loved me. She was ruined. I felt very sorry for her. "We'll definitely see each other, you'll see. I love you," I said and almost ran. "I love you too," she whispered after me. Our October was even better than July. She met me in a cab driven by her sweater's husband, who was very happy with my generous tip. "It's plenty," he said, surprised. Irka had gained a little weight, but I even liked it. She had become shapelier, sexier, and she was very happy. We arrived at my place. I left my luggage, kissed my mother, and we went straight to the other town with Irka. October is October even in the south. It was cold and we bought me an expensive but luxurious red shark jacket, which I have been wearing for years. That same day, she and I climbed a mountain. There weren't many people, thank God, so it didn't take much to find some privacy for her to get inside my pants. It was in October when Irka introduced me to her older sister and then to the rest of her relatives, and I fell in love with them all. I was well off with money then. I got a good paycheck from my previous job and we went to restaurants with her, rented luxury hotels, went on tours. In the tour bus, she would sneak under my pants to massage my dick. I sat there in the crowded bus as if nothing had happened, trying not to smile back at her smile. It was in October that her younger son kicked me out of the house when he arrived in a cab from somewhere drunk and angry, having a fight with the cab driver. Irka was very ashamed of him. Next time we met, he apologized for what he had done to me. That was when he almost caught us red-handed in the shower. When I left, she flinched for a long time whenever she saw someone in a red jacket. I told Irka that I was going to Omsk to visit my daughter on New Year's Day, which I did. I was torn between Irka and my daughter. But in February and 2 times the following summers I was with my Irka again. This is how our happy and anxious time has passed. For 2 years, Irka and I met every 3 months. I visited her for 2 or 3 weeks. All these 2 years I hardly ever saw my wife. A little more often I saw my daughter. Occasionally I was sent on a business trip to Omsk, so I saw my daughter regularly. And once or twice I saw my wife there too. Also, all the 3 of us got together in our apartment in Nizhny Vartos to celebrate the New Year 2020. I went to Nish twice in 2019. I had my pension legal paperwork to take care of and for surgery on my back. It didn't work with my pension though, as always with this Putin's cheating state. Under the Russian labor code, I was supposed to receive a preferential pension for my length of service in the north. But due to blurred printing in my workbook, I could not prove that I have worked in the north since 1987. An impossible situation in any normal country. Irka was jealous of my wife, which was unusual. Usually side chicks aren't jealous of their lovers' wives. Oh, don't I know chicks well? I'm not going to lie that I didn't exactly have sex with my wife, but it was very rare and wasn't as fiery as before. Naturally, Irka did not know about it, though she suspected it. Why tease her? Because of this, that year I saw Irka only once in summer after our luxurious mountain climbing and New Year's Eve joint celebration with her and her relatives, as well as with my sister and her son, my nephew. When I first came to Nizhny Vartos, my wife guessed I had someone on the side. You have already read about my wife in the previous chapter, and you must have made sure more than once, my dear reader, that nothing normal ever happens to me. That it is better not to get in touch with me. I felt acute this time that I did not love her. She and I were fighting all the time and I started drinking. I'm writing to you here and feeling sorry for my wife. It's terrible to be unloved, but she deliberately went for it. She seemed to love me after all. It's even more horrible to live with someone you don't love. Before Irka, I could still live like that with her. Like some reptiles who just don't have aggression to their different sexes, so they share the same hole. And now I couldn't do it anymore. I've raised the subject several times with her that we can't live together. It would be better for everyone if we get a divorce. She didn't even want to hear about it. I feel sorry for my wife. One time I fell asleep with my wireless headphones and YouTube running on my phone, and my wife opened my phone and saw all our correspondence with Irka. That's how you get punished if you don't respect confidentiality. She must have been shocked. She was packing up for me to work when she opened my phone. "Maybe you're going to her, not to work?" she asked me with hate and wet eyes. I thought she'd cry now. She didn't. She must already have, I guess. I felt sorry for her, but what could I do? Irka hid from her relatives that I was not a divorced man and firmly warned me not to blurt it out. I believe, however, that her elder sister was aware of that. She shared our correspondence with her when she didn't seem to care about my marital status at all. Nobody asked us anything, but I felt that everyone expected us to marry. Honestly, I didn't know how it was going to end. If I get a divorce, I'll probably lose everything, and Irka was afraid of it. And I didn't want to separate our property or deprive my wife and daughter of the little they had. But starting up from scratch again at my age, I don't know if I could manage it. How long do I have left to live? My father lived 68 years, but he had phenomenal health. I'm far from him. Will I live that long? The next days off in the spring I plan to spend with Irka. It's been so long since I've seen her. After 3 months of work, I was sent back to Omsk. My colleague went on vacation and I was asked to replace him for a month. And then I was about to go south to her when there was a lockdown all over the country for this coronavirus, and I stayed quarantined for my days off in Omsk. After my days off, I was told to stay put. I would work remotely. They never provided any work, however, and no money was paid. 7 weeks later, I spent my last 100 rubles. There was no work or salary. I don't even want to describe all the drama and despair of the situation in which I found myself. For that, I need the talent and diligence of Jack London, and I don't want to tire out my reader. I'm just gonna say that from then on I was in real trouble. And I noticed that Irka and I had our passionate feelings somehow gradually, but steadily, not that they began to fade away, but began to lose their sharpness. We were less and less writing to each other, "I love you," not to mention the fact that we have long lost the erotic connotation of our correspondence. We did not feel that excited anymore. And what crazy things we used to do before. One day I woke up and asked myself, what's that? I didn't love her anymore. Did I? She has become part of my life. I was happy to be loved by the prettiest girl in our class, school, town, the star of discos. Only her sister was prettier, so people thought. I didn't, but the whole town talked about her sister. I loved her since I was in high school, and I was both afraid and shy of her back then. But why I no longer dreamed about her at night? Why? Maybe it's because I didn't have to win her over. She, with the looks of Bridget Nielsen, many men dreamed and still dream of, who, as it turned out, has been in love with me all along. And I am the first man in her entire life with whom she was fallen in love. She has never loved anyone before in her life, not even her husband. I was happy about it, but did I love her? I looked at one of her photographs taken a few years before when I met her, and I had a strange feeling. Either I'm getting old or I have just fallen out of love with her. Did I love her anyway? However, I am the one who always gets dumped. There was no end in sight for this coronavirus pandemic shit. I continued to be in a remote worker uncertain status. I had almost no work, but they started paying me per diem. The chief engineer took care. I wrote about him below here in my separate chapter. He seemed to have been attracted to me, I guess, but I realized that it will not continue forever. Chief engineer softly hinted me to go on vacation in November. No work was yet available. I also softly refused. I realized that the vacation would be indefinite. I do not want to go home to Niš, but there was no way to go to my mother's place unnoticed since I was in the Omsk with my daughter now. My wife and daughter will immediately know who I really went to. There will be inevitable scandal. The new year 2021 has come. It was the most terrible year for me in every way. It was obvious that things were only going to get worse for all of us. Yet I certainly didn't know about the horrors that awaited us all next and other years to come. With the still significant support of the people for this maniac Putin. Even I didn't know what was to be expected of others. The ruler matched this country of imbeciles and idiots. That's why we all suffer, and it serves us right. That alone already made me crazy. Even my daily trips to the gym were not helping me much. My problems were added to my worries about Navalny's poisoning by Putin. His later return to Russia and his following imprisonment. I had a conflict with my roommate, whom I didn't like very much. I don't like Putinists, Trumpists, or rednecks at all. It wasn't even him who got hurt. It was the harmless roommate who tried to break us up. The next day he showed me a huge black bruise on his side, the size of a big orange. The same next day, there was an angry phone call from the chief engineer, where he strictly ordered me to take the next month off. I didn't even have time to finish the physical that I was undergoing. And then my mother calls me. She tells me that she was hit by a car. Her bones seem to be intact, but she's badly bruised. She's not paralyzed, but she can't move. I tell my daughter that I'm on my way to my mom's house. After a while, my wife calls back and says that I made it all up to meet my chick. My daughter comes over and says that either I take a ticket to Niš or she flies with me to my mom. We had a very elevated conversation. I called Irka, told her everything. After a while, she writes that it wouldn't have worked out for us anyway, that I'd better get back to my family. Thanks for the money, but she didn't ask for it. I sent it myself. Very timely, thank you. So much for our lovey-dovey ending. I always get dumped. But most of all, I was shocked by her statement that sex was not her priority. That she was not an animal. And this was after our sex with our hands tied up and blindfolded, and this endless and brain-penetrating blowjob with swallowing my cums, fucking up in the ass. I text her, thank you for being an animal with me. I was just a painkiller for her, and I have collected all the pain. And she blamed me for the betrayal of love. So who has betrayed our love, Irka? At the end of January, I arrived at my mother's house. While I was getting to her, I kept having out with Irka, and I almost lost my phone from the emotions I kept having at the airport. I managed to find my phone though, but I lost my fancy headphones anyway. But the most interesting thing began on the 23rd of February when I was taking care of my sick mother for over a month. On the Defender of the Fatherland Day, Oleg, the captain of the Long Sea, sent me a holiday greeting. And a photo where he drank with alcohol and happiness was with Irka. I forwarded this photo to Irka with the caption, "Congratulations." She replied, "Nothing to congratulate with, really?" And then our frantic correspondence started again. And here, for the first time, I began to notice the first inconsistencies in her. Like what? She would write something that I took as fact and didn't question, which then would turn out to be untrue. The more I went, the more this happened. I found out so much about her. She said that they had met at the same evening that I saw her on the morning of February 1. Then I went home from the hospital to make a house call for my mother and talk to her when she went out for the taxi to go to work. And I realized that she no longer loved me, though she claimed that she was just good at hiding her feelings. Whoa, I love Lisa Marius even less. Okay, it's hard not to lose my train of thought here, but I'll do my best. That morning, on my way back from the hospital, I called her and told her I was going home. We could see each other and say hello, since she had to go to work soon, if I remember right. She said she's in a different job now and she had to go to work later now. All right, I said I'd wait if she didn't mind. For 40 minutes I stood in the cold like a fool waiting for her. It was at this point I remembered that she used either to jump out in a minute or would have let me into her apartment whenever I'd come along and call her. Finally she came out. She looked even prettier than normal. She was beautiful, smiling as always. There was no kissing. Coronavirus. Yeah, sure. We talked for a while. She pointed out that I had gotten really thin. Now I didn't even have a hint of a belly. And I said I was even upset about how good she looked. To which she replied that she wasn't jealous of anything. That's why she looked good. Had I been jealous, I would have assumed she was seeing someone else. Now, knowing more about her, I wouldn't rule anything out. In passing, she mentioned that Oleg and Oleg number 2, a trucker. Sveta, that friend of hers, wanted to meet. I said that it would be without me. I have no time for that with my sick mother. We talked a little bit about Oleg the captain and his ugly girlfriend, whom he may still be secretly dating. And then a cab came to pick her up. And then, on February 23rd, it turned out that they had met on the evening of the same day. Again, Irka assured me that nothing happened between them. It's probably true. You cannot force her to be with someone she does not love. She was seeing me as long as she loved me, and now she says that it was me who did not love her. I just felt good with her. But jealousy clouds the mind. I saw it with Julia, how jealous I could be. I wasn't really mad at Oleg this time, though we once had a really big fight over her via messaging. This story upset me a lot. Right at this time, I was taking my mom for a CT scan of the sacrum of her pelvis. Then I calmed down a bit. There probably really wasn't anything between them. You should have seen that, Oleg. I sent him a sarcastic letter saying that wasn't a picture and sent my photo with her, where we kiss, and a couple of others, quite silly and extravagant ones, where I'm on the beach hugging with beautiful girls kissing me. That were the pictures. And I asked him not to be offended. I was only joking. It was a peaceful enough letter. He answered me as if he was timing it on purpose. On February 24, I was just arranging the unsuccessful hospitalization of my mother. Paramedics loaded my mother on a stretcher and we drove off when I received a frantic letter from him. Here's what he wrote me. It's good that Irunchik, that's how he called Irka, left you, because you are a codger and a dishonest man. Only such a man having an affair with a woman rasped on the second day about it and began to post joint photos everywhere possible, reveling it like a fetishist and describing what he feels when he fucks her to a complete stranger. I have never had anything and would never have with Irunchik. Those were my last normal words to you. I wrote, you would never have anything with a girl like that, you impotent drunk, and blocked him. I was shocked. Irka, not only did she leave me at such a difficult time for me, but she also bragged about it. She hid my manhood twice. At the same moment, I realized that I no longer loved her. Sobering up came instantly to me, like a whisper. Who did I fall for? Uneducated, smoking woman, once beautiful but aging, with an iron false tooth in her swollen feet, from hard physical work on her feet, at cash registers in stores, warehouses, and assembly lines in cold shops, disfiguring and aging her additionally. I wrote her. That very morning you joked with me about Oleg and his ugly Lena, and in the evening boasted in front of him and others in the meeting about returning me to my family. Who are you after that? In short, goodbye. You used me and left me. How does that make you look good? You're going to be lonely. She sent all sorts of gifts through social media wishing good to my family. What's that? She keeps motivating me to come back to my family? I told her not to send me any gifts and stop curtsying to me. There's no excuse for her hypocrisy. Later, being emotional, I wrote a fierce letter to Oleg and condemned myself to be hated by Irka forever and fell down low in my own eyes. Hey, I saw her 2 more times after that meeting you had. She put on such a show. I did not know that she had dumped me. If I had known about that meeting and what she had said, I would never have talked to her anymore. I don't talk to her now. I'm an asshole, huh? Who's not? Is she not? She, knowing I was married, my wife was still in town when she seduced me and fucked me on her son's bed. I wasn't the first one to get in the pants. You treat her like an associate, a comrade, a la Hitler and Eva Braun. So know what she and I wanted to try everything possible between a man and a woman in sex. Tied hands and blindfolded and fucked every fucking hole. And that we exchanged explicit photos and videos. And if you insult me again, I can send to you only this time some of those photos. That's it, dear. Choose your words. We can still meet, and you can't forward this to her. I don't care. So he did. Irka wrote me this. I'm fucking amazed at you. And I was in love with you. Now she has learned what the real hatred was. Man, I didn't know she was so capable of swearing. How unbecoming of her. She wrote that she would tell her sons everything. I wrote, come on, involve them too. They don't know about you yet. She wrote me back that she had jumped the gun about her sons and wrote, let it be on your conscience. I will have to live with that all my life now, I answered her, but after that, until I left this town, I carried a knife with me in my backpack. You never know now. A mother is a mother. If someone hurt my mother, he would know all about it. What if she told them anyway? And I did hurt her. I wanted to hurt, to humiliate her in revenge for what she did to me. Few days later, on Goodbye Sunday, Irka sent me a letter in which she asked my forgiveness for everything and that she'd forgive me too, a traditional bullshit on that day. Man, that made a huge difference. I note, however, that I had yet to find out what a liar she has turned out to be, not to mention the other horrors. I was in high spirits right away, and all I wrote her was that she still didn't have the full picture. But okay, I wouldn't write her yet, though he had probably presented it in a twisted and out-of-context way. And a few months later, she wrote me again saying that she had read everything I had written to Alec. She was becoming increasingly inconsistent, and for some reason she was defending that mean captain, this cartoon Don Quixote character. She, layer by layer, gradually began to open up to me, exposing her real, slightly scary core. I think she was doing it to hurt me more. She used to say that she had never had anyone but her husband before me. It turned out that she had. True, she didn't have many, but they were all long-lasting relationships. On average, they lasted about 5 years. All her lovers were considerably younger than her by about 15 to 17 years. They were slender, strong, and very sexy, with a clear hint of me and my age. She had her first relationship with her husband still around. That husband, she used to tell me how he used to torment her with unreasonable jealousy. She couldn't live with him. Now it turns out that her husband's jealousy was justified. That for the last 5 years, during which she was dating a dog handler who later became a special forces officer, she did not sleep with her husband, meaning she was so faithful she did not jump from husband to lover as she thought I did from her to my wife. Poor husband, I felt sorry for him now, as well as for all the husbands who had such tormenting wives. She wrote me about romantic walks in the mountains with her first lover and his dog, about going to a nightclub with him. When I showed her what nightclubs I went to, she wrote that it wasn't the main thing in her life. How quickly she changed her mind. I've heard that before, like that she's not an animal and that sex never meant much in her life. Sure it didn't. Who said she wanted to try everything with me? I didn't force her. What's the most important thing in life? Fucking in a mountain forest while walking the dog? That's how she and I started our dates, by the way. Only without the dog. That's how she knew these places so well, even at night. She's still in touch with some of her exes. I didn't elaborate on how she was in touch. I was getting scared to further correspond with her and keep learning things about my little angel. I asked her why she was writing me all these and why she was then offended by what I had written to Alex, since it turned out to be only part of the truth I knew now about her. She wrote to make it easier for me to forget her. I wrote to her that I had no illusions about women before her, but with her I wanted to believe in the fairy tale she was feeding me. I wanted to believe that I was the only one she adored and loved. Would it make me feel better if I knew she was a whore too? She wrote again that she didn't love them, didn't seduce any of them like she did me, but I didn't trust her anymore. She didn't seduce them, the young and good-looking ones, one with the cute dimples on his cheek and the other with big eyes. She did not love them. She stopped having sex with me as soon as she got a little cold to me, and she dated them for 5 years each. She'd tell me next one that she didn't love anybody, and maybe she'd write to someone that she just had a good time with me, like she wrote to me about those young lovers of hers. She also let it slip in one of her letters that she gave herself once the word not to meet married men anymore before she met me. I did not want to know anything about it, not to get further upset. So she had married lovers too. Just like that, layer upon layer, she exposed herself to me. All her texts clearly had messages to me. You wanted to show Oleg how trashy I am. You have no idea. Take that. And I took it all. I wrote her that I would forget her, but she would not. She will still love me. She will fall in love with me again. She wrote several times, though not categorically, no, she would not. Or sarcastically, yes, maybe tomorrow, to which I replied, not tomorrow, but gradually she would. Well, she was methodically finishing me off, obviously feeding off of me and enjoying it. She was on horseback with a crown on her head. She was a total winner, and I was crushed. She never had loved me, and she had plenty of young and beautiful lovers. Bravo, Irka. I wanted to ruin her mood, but I didn't know how. She wished me to forget her soon, to return home and have great sex with my wife. Sex was still nagging at her, though she regularly told me she didn't care for it. Although she once wrote me, it is very pleasant to have sex. However, when I got home to my wife, Irka asked me after a while how was our sex life, and she guessed we probably weren't getting out of bed. I was surprised. I mechanically replied, she's sleeping. She always sleeps after that. Shit. Irka must be thinking about me all the time. Strange for a person who left me. I had no fucking idea. Our correspondence resumed again. She wrote that she had been asked on a date and she would probably say yes. I asked if she wanted to make me jealous. She succeeded, I won't hide it. She wrote that life did go on. She'd have to live more than just memories. So she remembered, thank goodness. She later wrote that the man was interesting and she might fall in love with him. He had invited her to a restaurant and in the evening they would just hang out. No sex at this time. On the one hand, she was on the upswing. On the other hand, she showed her weakness and that she still cared about me for the first time. She also saw that I had gone back to my house, to my wife, and she had no one and she wanted to have a man. I even had my doubts. Was she even invited on a date? She's quite a liar and an actress too, as it turned out. Nevertheless, that night I nervously monitored her activity on social media and on WhatsApp. As long as she was there, she is obviously not getting late. Usually her activity ended around 11 p.m. when she goes to bed. This time she stopped at 9 p.m. and was back in there again at about 2 a.m. It's not quite clear how should I interpret this. On a first date, a woman is always carefully prepared, being anxious, and that would be unlikely for her to be on social media until 9 p.m. On the other hand, it looks very much like she came back at 2 a.m. from somewhere. Well, she could have faked it, and also remembering how she bragged to her sister and probably someone else about me and sent pictures of me naked, well, with a towel on my hips. I thought, should a date happen, she sure would brag about it to me with pictures as well. But I did not ask her about it, not to get upset and show that I care about it. What's the big deal? During such correspondence, I began to remember my former chicks, very beautiful, young and not so young. I had parted badly with almost all of them. There's obviously something wrong with me too. With some very badly, but they all love me very much now, except for one, that Julia, the crazy one. She wrote back to me that she didn't care. It was all in the past before her. Also, when we dated, she wouldn't even let me talk about them. She was so freaked out by it. It was really like nothing could get through her. It was always like that with her, which was why she looked better than me. I also remembered a university classmate girl who was not in this book. A smart, red-headed girl with whom I had a brief affair, who also initiated it. Almost all women initiated a relationship with me, a married woman. When Irka wrote me with indignation saying, "Do you want to tell me that I was the initiator of our relationship?" I told her that yes, and more than that she was the initiator not only of our relationship, but of all the one that came before me. To which she replied that she had a man's character, that she behaved like a man, starting and ending relationships whenever she wanted and with whomever she wanted. Bravo again, Irka. Pinned again. But this time, during our correspondence, she rapidly began to lose her position as a winner, again comparing her former young lovers to me, not in my favor. She acted as if she wasn't the one who had dumped me, but I was. She began to write that it was clear that I was not her first or last lover. She wrote again that she had frequent sex and lasting relationships with all her lovers. You just don't walk away from someone like her quickly. Nice. And you've had plenty of men, I text her with a smiley face. Sex was not the main thing for her, remember? She's not an animal, as she wrote me. No, she replied. She just regretted that she did not meet anyone waiting for me. And loved me too, I thought. So she let it slip again. At least she did not cheat on me. I know that for sure now. I felt I was just one step away from her direct insults. I was able to stop her. I reminded her that the winners do not behave like that. Let's both keep our dignity, since we are so over. Of course, I'm far from her former young lovers. I'm sure their dicks were rock solid with more powerful spitting ejaculation. I'm under 60 for crying out loud. I wrote that Larissa, a short chapter about her will be next below. Whom I turned down for Irka, behaved similarly, but she can be understood. She was an unhappy, rejected woman, to which Irka responded she was not feeling unhappy and rejected. On the contrary, she was cheerful and happy, but she stopped and wrote that she didn't mean to insult me. Thank you for that much. And that's when I decided to strike the forbidden blow. The crown had to be removed from her somehow. I had no idea how well it would work. I was beginning to believe she was invulnerable. Now it was especially noticeable how much she missed her last lover before me, the one who was 17 years younger. I immediately pictured my aunt, who was 70 years older than me. I remember how old she looked to me at her age of 34 when I was 17. No fucking way. Irka sent pictures of him. He's handsome, all right. He had large eyes, just the way as she described. She wrote that she had ended her relationship with him 6 months before we met, but they continued to correspond, and he suggested several times to resume their relationship. But I already had you, which she now regrets, after hearing everything from me. I text her that I was pleased that she hadn't cheated on me. By the way, he turned out to be married too. She never dated a married guy on principle, remember? She, by the way, accepted his invitation, but it didn't seem to have worked right. She just keeps falling into the same trap, the principal one. She remembered again her first boyfriend. As it turned out later, he was not her first lover. The one who was 15 years younger, whom she had dated when she was still married, and how often they had sex and how good it was. They had it in hotels, at his place he rented, in the countryside. Later, her friend, I will tell you more about her. Later, told me that they never stayed in any hotels. They had no money for that. He was a very young sinologist. Neither they had any sex in his place. He rented a room in the house where his landlady lived. So she fucked with him anywhere in the streets. And since it was the tourist area, it was very difficult to have privacy for them. Not even in the woods. Once in winter, they found that called Diana's grotto to do it. And it was getting dark. She never sent me his photo. It was on her laptop, not on her phone, and she lost all contact with him. Something happened to her SIM card. And they, the special forces, were not allowed to be on social networks. That's it. She may have not explicitly told me that she had no one but her husband before me. She might have said that she hadn't loved anyone before me, but now I was sure she wouldn't remember them with such nostalgia if she hadn't. She wrote that she was very happy with all of them. That was her euphemism for the word love. I was hurt, for the umpteenth time. Why was she doing that? I was jealous of her. I was envying them for their youth and strength. For some reason I kept imagining her naked, beautiful, sucking the dick of her first lover, only 5 years older than her son. She had a good time with them, but she kept insisting that she didn't lose her head with them. She had everything under control with them. Maybe. At any rate, she didn't introduce them to her and her sister's families as she did with me. So I highly doubt it now that she didn't brag about them to her sister. And I struck. I wrote her that I had had sex with my wife a few times during our relationship. And then it started. What are we even talking about? And she started reminding me of my vows of love for her, that I had no life without her. She began to act almost like me after Alec interfered in our relationships. She was not swearing this time, though. She knew now what it felt like to be deceived, betrayed. And I, remembering that she spent the last 5 years cheating on her husband with her first young lover, I decided to strike again. Now I was sure it was going to work. I had forgotten about that incident myself. I wrote that amid my relationship with her, I had cheated several times with another woman about whom I won't even write anything here. Sorry. Let it be a mystery, an intrigue for everyone. After a long enough pause, she was writing from work, so she didn't answer to me right away, but kept thinking. She seemed to be experiencing similar shock, jealousy, all the things I had experienced before when she was mocking me. She wrote that she even remembered the day it happened. It was when I came to meet her from work. I was drunk and my shirt was on inside out. No, I replied, it didn't come to that then. I thought she was referring to my cousin when we drank with him and his wife. It didn't come to that then. That was a year before that. She was totally confused. So it wasn't just one either? Just one. I don't care. I don't care if it was 1 or 10. You betrayed me all the time. And what words did you say to me? And I sucked your dick after that. I almost throw up now. She reminded the Vanilla Sky movie where Cameron Diaz's character said to her lover before driving her car at full speed off a bridge, I love you, don't you see? I swallowed your cum. Wait a minute, I text her. When I came to your room just for my wife at the beginning of our relationship, when I even worried about not getting my dick up with you, didn't that bother you at all? To what she replied, your wife was clean, but where the fuck did you run to? I have no idea. I wrote that one was clean too. We just had 2 oral sexes and regular one with a condom on. She was hysterical. How disgusting it all is, she kept writing. I reminded her of her cheating on her husband, and she replied that she slept with one, not jumped from lover to husband. Yeah, she's the decent one. Her husband was the one who didn't have sex with anybody for 5 years before he said yes to her divorce. Judging by her social media activity, she hadn't slept well and had to work in the morning. She also wrote me several messages full of insults. I read them only in the morning. I did not reply. In the morning she was in social networks, probably checking if I read them for any replies. In the morning she was in social networks, probably checking if I read them or for any replies. And I felt like I was finally free of her, and she felt bad. I turned out to be unique here too. No one had ever cheated on Irka before me. I beat her, I defeated her, I crushed her. My ego was happy now, and once again, I was sure now that she did not cheat on me anyway, and she loved me, though forgetting about it. Moreover, I was sure that she would have no one after me, which in time would only make her love and remember me more. Almost everyone I've broken up with loves me, and I've broken up worse than I did with Irka. I was tougher than Jose Navarra. I was tougher than Carmen herself. That's it, Irka. Take that. Of course, nobody reads Kuprin nowadays, not even in Russia, not to mention the rest of the world. He has a story called The Pomegranate Bracelet, where the main character loves one lady unrequitedly and so wholeheartedly, and in the end shoot himself for it. Here I am, this kind of a hero, who was not just was being loved back, but who was pounced on with crazy love. Do you think it was possible for such a hero to handle such an overdose? Neither I could handle that kind of love. Here comes her friend, one of my classmates' girl from another school who lived next door to her. Such a coincidence that I did not know about. It's a small world after all. Wrote me that she constantly had men, which was not surprising. She was a beautiful and charismatic woman. That she knew a lot about her, but would not write anything about it to me, much less judge her. She had no right to do so. Everyone lives as they can, as they want, as they see fit. And Irka started dating again with that big-eyed young married guy that she had before, and probably along with me, and who had turned out to be one of the hot Karachi guy, who always had some tensions with Russians, but who are very fond of beautiful girls, especially Russians. She was afraid to start a new relationship after me. She was afraid to get into trouble with a man like me again. When she parted with me, she wrote me that sex was not important to her and that she was not an animal. But now she obviously met him only and exclusively for sex. She could not count on anything else with him, and in her mind she must have understood that such a relationship with him now surely would not last long, and they were of course doomed. Why would he need an aging mummy when he apparently is doing fine and has 3 beautiful, healthy sons? Irka and I stayed in touch long after we broke up, and I learned a lot about her that I didn't know before. I never knew how many men she had before me. She said she had 6, including her husband and me. A friend of hers, that classmate of mine from another school, wrote me that she did not count her lovers, but she was pretty sure she had many times more. Yes, said Irka Court, she had more than 6, though she didn't say how many she had. She hadn't counted them. To be honest, I was getting tired of catching her lying, so I figured it was probably about 10 or so. Yes, for a while I felt like D'Artagnan the moment he saw the lily brand on my lady's arm. And then I thought it wasn't even too much for a beauty like her. 2 of her exes were married, me and this Karachi boy. The 3 of her rest ones had cheated on her. The first who cheated on her was her first love, to whom she gave her virginity and who traumatized her with it for life. The second was also the handsome fiancé she had before, the Karachi guy, and she almost married him. His relatives loved her, but whom she caught talking on the phone with another woman. And the third such a scoundrel was me. A fortune teller told her that she would be alone. I'm sure of that too, by the way. However, I will always remember Irka fondly. She's an incredible woman, and I had unforgettable and amazing sex with her that suited her well, whatever she did in bed, and even decorated her, as she met all my expectations and even more. I will always remember and love you, Irka. I know that you love me too, even though you will never admit it to me. The fact that you never forgave me for cheating only confirms that I was the only one you really loved and still love. And you never knew my biggest secret. No one knew it. And I found out your secret when I went to your social networks. And here's what happened, Tirka. While you were seeing a married Karachai boy 70 years younger than you had at least one more lover in parallel with him. That very guy who wanted to marry you and whom you caught talking on the phone with another woman. The Armenian. One lover wasn't enough for you, even that young and handsome. What about that sex wasn't first in your life? That you are not an animal? I keep getting to know you every day, though I'm tired of it. What's wrong with your head, honey? I remembered when I asked you why you write about your exes now, and you said so I wouldn't regret breaking up with you. Yes, there was a time when I stopped regretting breaking up with you. I even started regretting dating a woman of your kind. Still, I hoped that the time would erase all the bad stuff. Until I learned something else about you. As you have seen, Irka constantly reproached me for being unscrupulous, for having many women without regular relationships, for jumping on every beach like a dog, while she had regular and long-term relationships with everybody she had sex with. She was not a whore, at least. Although she was subconsciously giving herself away, my rose-colored glasses just prevented seeing it on her. She wrote me once after our breakup. You are heroic lovers, and we, in cases like these, are whores. Then she added, I may be like that, but you shouldn't worry about that anymore. What's like that? I got worried. What kind of girl like that I dated all along? Fuck me. When it finally stopped, is there any limit to her fall in my eyes? How can she live with that after all, you whore? And this was the woman of my dreams? I should have written to her that a lock and a key are not the same thing. A key that can open any lock is priceless, but a lock that can be opened by any lock is bad. A hero lover is one thing, but a whore is quite another. Forgive me, feminists, if you are reading or listening to this. Later, I asked again her ex-next-door friend if Irka had one-night stands with men without further relationships, not hoping to get an answer from her. But this time she unexpectedly wrote that yes, she had. But she was sure that even she didn't know all about all of them. My heart, for the umpteenth time, was once again pounding with hatred for Irka. What a fucking bitch she was. She fucking lied to me. And I loved her. I wrote to Irka almost immediately. Well, my little Irka, I carefully studied your psychological profile, analyzed everything, and I took off my rose-colored glasses. I've studied all of your babbles and other signals. Your subconsciousness just kept signaling it all the time, but my rose-colored glasses did not let me see you. Well, you did have one-night stands without any relationships. Give me a break. You did have a long relationship with these three, that's why you confessed. Anyway, I'd put a lily on your shoulder. You are an animal. All you need is a tattoo to complete your well-worn look. To which she just wrote, Are you fucking nuts? At the time of our breakup, Irka wrote to me that it wouldn't have worked out between us anyway. We were too much alike for that. I realize now that she knew what she was writing about. We both were whoremongers. We both didn't really get laid much when we were young and started tearing it up by adulthood. We both had 3 or 4 more or less stable relationships, and the rest were as they had to, up to one-night stands. And we both probably won't have any more serious relationships. There will probably be a few short ones, up to one-time encounters, and they'll stop soon. This is why she initially was distrustful and jealous of me, because she projected her behavior onto me. She wrote that she was cheating on her husband in retaliation, so he was no longer jealous in vain. He was bothering her with unfounded jealousy even before she cheated. I cheated on Irka too, I might say in retaliation. It's a good thing we broke up. It would have been worse if I had found out about her. And I would have found out about her if I'd married her. I probably would have just killed her to get clean. Hopefully, in time, I'll get over the shock of my relationship with her. I don't want to remember how much I hated her. I want to remember how much I loved her and she loved me too. And the difference between the two of us was that I, as a real Aries shoot, was more honest than she was, and didn't play the principled and decent person as she did. She was no better than me, she was just better at pretending she was. I keep feeling like I'm never going to finish this chapter about her, but I have to. I guess I haven't been as candid about anyone in this book as I was about her. Even about her, I haven't written all the things we've done in bed. And I also think that despite finding so many skeletons in her closet, that she was still the most mysterious woman to me. That she still has secrets from me that I'll probably never know. And thank God for that. That next-door friend of hers and my classmate wrote me that she had 2 lovers all the time. One for her own pleasure and one for her health. She did write me, though, that she probably did not cheat on me. But she would never guarantee that either. So I stayed in touch with that next-door friend of hers and kept getting to know Irka better and better. I had already learned that she had 2 lovers at a time, but it turned out that her lovers were not just sonnies, but also sugar daddies when she was still young and dazzlingly beautiful. She said that she did not know all the stories and had not spoken to her in a long time before telling me this. In the store where Irka worked and I with my cousin drank beer once close by, when I didn't say hello when I saw her passing by our table outside, being upset because of her shift mate inside who didn't respond to my greeting in the store, who was also Irka and our classmate as well. A prominent man over 60 years old often went there to shop. He was the retired police chief of the town and people called him Sergei. He paid Irka with big bills and always left their change with her. He liked the girl and she returned her attention to the generous man. Long story short, he tamed the girl. They started dating. And that was long before her first lover she supposedly had been with when she still was with her husband. That young and handsome dog handler in the police department. Then he disappeared. She missed him, all his money, and began to make inquiries about him. And he, the retired police boss, was opening his own business, a sausage shop. He was busy buying equipment, hiring people. She quit her job at the store where she worked and came to him. "Help me out, Sergei, I am out of a job now." He put her in one of his stores to sell his products, and then one of his secretaries goes on maternity leave and he puts Irka in her place in his office. Well, Sergei was indeed a powerful and tough boss, but too old for her now, and his young and handsome nephew worked next door to them, and Irka drew her attention to him. Well, Sergei was indeed a powerful and tough boss, but too old for her now, and his young and handsome nephew worked next door to them, and Irka drew her attention to him. So, a new office romance had started. They started dating secretly from their boss. She was doing double adultery now, since, don't forget, it was long before her first lover, when she was still married, and it quickly became known in the office. Sergei started getting reports about the affair. He didn't believe it at first, but decided to check it out anyway. Long story short, in the evening he offered her a ride home, to which she said thank you, but she still had a lot of work to do. He left, and they got late right on his desk, and in the heat of the moment, he, out of the fucking blue, of course came back. He beat them both and fired. It remains a mystery how she explained to her husband her bruises under the eyes. And Sergei took his car and got into an accident he barely survived. After that, Irka found another job in another town in a building material store, where she met that dog whisperer Vitaly and Yura, seeing each alternately, one after another, followed by the Armenian guy Arkady and that hot-eyed handsome Karachay boy, seeing each alternately, one after another. Then she again changed her job and met me, after 6 months, as she parted with Karachay boy, according to her. But I do no longer believe a word she said. Her friend said that Irka had several other episodes like these, though not as epic as this one, and that she could tell me about them as well. I said no, I'd had enough. And I remembered how she used to blab out. She'd once told me how she'd been driving the car from the right-hand seat when an old man got sick behind the wheel. That's her sugar daddy she told me about. I also remembered her, clearly knowledgeable, as I now realize, saying once, "Those office romances are the most dangerous," which I agree with, by the way, remembering Julia. Especially when you, a married woman, have two romances in the same office. And I also remembered her writing to me that she hated rich men who thought everything could be bought. She was talking about Sergei, I guess. Or maybe she had other rich men, who knows. She proudly told someone from the city administration that she couldn't be bought. I also thought that it was because of people like her that Karachais or Dagestanis despise Russian girls. So they fuck them with pleasure. For example, they especially find them for their young men so that the boys know what's what before they get married. As Dagestanis told me in the army, they used to, before they get married, fuck donkeys to relieve their rabid libido. Then, as they'd say, Russian horse came along. And I also remembered when we corresponded after we broke up, I noticed that there didn't seem to be any Russians among her lovers. Well, Russians don't like me, she wrote. And who likes you then? They despise you, yes, but they certainly don't like you. Why like people like you? That was the story. At the time this story was written, she still hadn't seen anyone after me. I didn't take any steps to see to it, although I made sure that she would never have any relationship with that sea captain. But it seems to me, even without that, she is doomed to painful loneliness for her life she had and for things she had done to me. Maybe her next-door friend was right, and Irka wasn't interested in me as a personality, but only in my status, my money, and prospects. And when she saw that I was not good enough for her, she immediately dumped me. But things changed, and she'll love me again, but she won't be able to get me back. My attitude toward her changed from an overwhelming and tender love for her to wild hatred and contempt. After she decided to break up with me, I had a burning desire to get her back. After she told me about her exes, I no longer had that desire to get her back, but it was still nice to remember her, and we kept in touch. But after I found out she was an epic whore in our town, she stole my memories of her. And I lost all my desire to communicate with her. There was only a burning desire to revenge her fiercely. But I made an incredible effort to abandon that idea. I would never want to take the sin on my soul, and she would get these without my intervention anyways. Such treacherous acts like these just cannot go unpunished. Now, my desire was to get in touch with this Karachai boy, her ex-boyfriend. I found him in social networks. I wanted to find out unobtrusively how long had he been seeing her. I had strong suspicion that while she was in a relationship with me, she still continued to date him as well. I was just curious if she did have any limits to her falling. But I didn't get a chance to talk to him. He said he didn't know her at all, which was understandable. For people of his mentality, the biggest shame was that she was 17 years older than him. For him, everything about her was a shame, but she was so beautiful. He probably didn't even know that she was seeing another man besides him. Oh, well, whatever. I thought she was mysterious. She turned out to be murky instead. I thought she was the Snow Queen, who loved no one before me. She turned out to be Emmanuel instead. She certainly has a lot to remember. So let her remember. She wouldn't have any new memories. I remembered that I deleted the picture of her wearing my plaid shirt on my DSLR without even showing it to her. The picture, she was putting makeup on her face in front of the mirror after the shower in the hotel room I rented, where we had our crazy night in late October before I had to leave her for another 2 months work hitch. That was my second month off with her. I told her the picture didn't turn out good. Actually, it did. I, for the first time, through the pink veil, saw her swollen and ugly legs in that picture. And I saw how worn out her body in fact was. I thought then it must have come from her on and off dietaries, causing her periodic weight gains and losses, or also from her hard work on the assembly line. That must have been a hell of stress on her body. I knew nothing yet about her lifestyle, her numerous lovers that must have also contributed to this. And when I found out, no, not everything about her. She hadn't even told her friends about everything. And her friend had only told me part of what she knew about her. I hated her in a beastly way. But I still loved her. I was ready to kill her because she had thoughtlessly and generously given away her young and beautiful self to anyone for a thrill. And by the time I came into her life, she had already used up her body. And I had leftovers. My love for her had scotched those leftovers as well, and I knew I wrote to her that she would have no one after me. A colleague of mine once wrote about me that I'd leave nothing but scorched dirt after me. But I also knew that I never with anyone else would have such unforgettable, crazy sex without the breaks I had with her. A couple of months after my final and very scandalous breakup with Irka, I had meetings with beautiful, sometimes very beautiful and young girls, with whom I had grueling sexual marathons. With some, we even drank wine without stopping. It was so hard to break away from each other. About whom I bragged to Irka's sister, knowing that she would surely pass it to Irka, so that Irka would know how far behind she was from them in sex. But with no one, before or after, I had such creative sex as with her. Yes, she may not have orgasmed as violently as the others, but sex with her was particularly chic and charming. Not to mention the way she sucked dick. There was no one like before or after her. Irka then wrote me that her ex-sugar daddy Sergei died not too long before. May he rest in peace, and he was a great guy, unlike me. Maybe this Sergei was a great guy, I never knew him. Then why was she cheating on him with his nephew in that case, if he was so cool to her? And where was her gratitude to him for getting her out of the store and giving her a decent job? To which she replied that he wasn't that generous. He never had enough money to keep production going. That's why, she cheated on him. We stayed in touch with Irka for a while. We were both still having a hard time finally breaking up with each other. I remembered Irka telling me a story about her and her friends taking a cab and going to the cemetery at midnight on a dare. I thought then, what all this was pretty much weird. I asked her next door if there was such a thing taking place. It was. Only Irka went with her yet another lover to the cemetery deep at night to fuck. For the thrill, probably. She told them that herself. This was some kind of satanism, some twisted form of infernal romance. Creepy. Irka's former next door told me that Irka and the young Sinologists had also fucked in the grotto of Diana, which was an architectural monument in the resort town of Petegorsk. It was winter, there were few tourists now, off-season, and it got dark early, and there were no places to fuck. As always with them, no money for short-stay hotels, and the Sinologists rented an apartment with a landlady, if you remember. And I took pictures with Irka and her sister at that grotto of Diana when we were walking around Petegorsk. I wonder if she remembered at that moment how she used to whore here with one of her lovers when she was married. Even the cab drivers, according to Irka's next door, made fun of the way she went to Petegorsk to see one or the other of her lovers, black. Once again, Irka and I had it out in our correspondence. She once again accused me of debauchery, of taking whores to my house. Yes, I replied, I tried to keep it respectable. I could certainly have done it in Diana's grotto. She responded mechanically, yes, you could. Then she added, I'd forgotten all about it myself. I asked, why? Ashamed much? On the contrary, she replied, it was fantastic. As the saying goes, love doesn't mind a poor heart if there's a loving heart. Then went silent for a while in shock. Her next door told me about it too. Then she wrote, kudos. And for the first time I felt her animal wild anger at her ex-next door friend. In the heat of the moment I even forgot to remind her where the fuck we did have sex for the first and most of the rest of the time. Wasn't it at her house on her youngest son's bed? Then she texted me that she should probably talk to her husband and tell him about her and her lover, whom, by the way, she had introduced to, with whom she had been dating for years. I wrote her that she'd better leave her friend alone if she doesn't want her children to know about her lifestyle. They won't like it, especially the younger one. She started texting me that her oldest daughter was involved in prostitution. She told that herself. Which turned out to be true, by the way, but I didn't care. As far as I know, she didn't start a cat fight with her ex next door. They are trying hard to avoid each other, and so far they have succeeded. Now, I don't know who is jealous of who. The next door has almost 15 years of uninterrupted relationships with her lover, and yet she has a strong and close-knit family. Irka was a creative whore, you can't deny her that. She told me herself how she had fucked a Karachay man driving the car on the highway. It was acceptable for her to text such things to me now, and she stubbornly denied the facts of double relationships even since she was married until the last. Although later she admitted that she did not immediately interrupt old relationships by starting new ones. But the biggest shock for her was when I found out about Sergei the sugar daddy. I did not immediately write to her about it. I did not want to expose her friend, but yet another of her hypocrisies pissed me off. She texted me that if I had cheated on her the way I cheated on my wife, I would have been kicked out of her house, to which I wrote this. Just by saying A, you should have said B, and that was it. Everything would have been closed. I probably would have gotten over it by now. You were the one who convinced me that you were different, that you couldn't be bought. I believed and fell in love with you. But I'm an adult. I've lived, I know women. And if you hadn't convinced me that you were different, I had the image of Irka from the 10th grade on top of that, and I had Photoshop started in my head. Maybe I wouldn't have fallen in love. We would have hooked up and then gone our separate ways. Yes, I had a few long-term relationships with Julia and you that ended horribly. And don't you ever blame me for cheating and whoring. You who was kicked out of your job for whoring, who not only cheated on your husband but on your lover as well, have no right to do so. You wouldn't be just kicked out for that. I would have fucking killed you. I fucking hate you. I hope it goes away, but now you make me sick of all women. Now whenever I see one of our girls staying over after work, I'm like, she's staying over to fuck. Although that's not true, of course. Now it's harder to do it. There are cameras around, and yet I think like that all the time. To what she shocked responded, "My life is my rules." 2 smiles. Now I have 2 saints talking behind my back. 2 smiles again. I guess I need to see and talk my ex-next-door friend's husband. After this shock, she no longer denied anything, although she insisted on telling me her version of the story in the office, and that she had not been kicked out of her job, that she had left on her own. Sergei even offered to stay if she wanted, but I did not want to even hear about it. She had completely lost any confidence in me. She was a liar and a whore. I called her what her husband had called her before, a slut, and she blocked me everywhere. Finally, we broke up for good. Judging from the story, Sweta told me that my classmate who didn't want to sit with me at the same desk at school, but who was always kissing me many years later at our class reunion, and her old friend, Irka, always have been like that, a liar, a schemer, and other women's manhunter. And originally, Irka blabbed it out herself to me again well before our breakup. Sveta was probably the first woman in our class to get married, and Irka was her witness at their wedding. Then, as Irka told me, after the wedding, Sveta's husband suddenly came to her. Irka was kind of surprised and called Sveta. Why didn't she just kick him out? Sveta told me the same story differently. She went to Irka's and found her husband there. She and Irka had a fight. Irka assured Sveta that nothing had happened between them. Yeah, sure. Sveta divorced him a year later when they already had a daughter. I kept remembering Irka, our ship and communication and correspondence. Then our correspondence after the breakup. I have screenshots of our correspondence, but I can't read them. And I got convinced that she was a pathological liar. Maybe it was her psychological defense to lie and be a hypocrite. She really didn't want to be lonely, and at the same time she didn't feel comfortable accepting herself as a whore. No one likes a whore, no matter what gender is. For example, a colleague of hers from her previous job on the assembly line, at the time of our parting, she found a job as a warehouse manager. Told her about how he, working the night shift, went out to the gazebo for a smoke. A woman packer came up to him and, after talking for a while, unzipped his fly, pulled out his cock and started sucking it for him until he came. Then she spit out his semen, and after a little while, they went back to work. What on earth is going on, Irka wrote. Stop the planet, I'm going down. She didn't expect that from her. You wouldn't even know she was capable of that. She looked modest. I asked her what she did that Irka didn't do. Irka wrote that she was married, to which I replied, didn't you do such things when you married too? Irka was offended at me, and I thought that she sincerely condemned a woman for the same thing that she herself did much better and more creative. And what kind of former colleague of hers, almost 30 years younger than her, he was bragging to her about things like that. This hypocrisy is borderline pathological. She is a psychopath. By the way, I remembered something. I don't even know if I should write about it here or not. Okay, I will. When I started dating Irka, I bragged about her to my sister. Irka also bragged about me to her sister, as you remember. My sister recognized her at once, and this is what she wrote to me. I was maybe 14 years old. A man of about 35 came up to me in the park, not far from our school, and showed me a picture of Irka, who was 15 years old then, author's note, sucking dick. He asked me if I wanted to make some money. The job was easy and nice, and the money was good. I was scared. I didn't believe her at the time, although I noted to myself that she was the best at sucking my dick. No one before her had done it as good as she had. The fact was that my sis, not long before, had undergone a complicated operation on her head in Belgium, where she lives. Some benign tumor, thanks God, had been removed. But that's not even the point. Those who read me know that almost everyone in our family is creative, sometimes on the verge of madness and sometimes beyond. There is an enviable periodicity of madness among us. So I thought, another one. And now I think that nothing can be ruled out with Irka. I immediately remembered how she, at 15 again, at Honey Falls, she posed for my camera with a cigarette. Even though it was very dangerous for her in 1981, or her initiatives to send her sexual pics after the show to me. I wrote her back then that the pics were great, but from then on she'd better hide her face. The internet was a dangerous thing. She was always bold. She wasn't afraid of anything. I remembered many such nuances. For example, she would tell me in and out of place that she was not jealous of anyone, while accusing her friends of being jealous of her. Actually, her subconscious was screaming, "I'm jealous of everyone and I want everyone to be jealous of me." This is okay to me, but not okay to her, and therefore she was hiding her true thoughts and intentions in this way. All that sex isn't important to me, I am not an animal. Exactly the opposite. Or as she wrote to me after the breakup, I am a happy person. I am surrounded by people who love me and whom I love. Which I could easily recognize as, even though I have sons, a sister and nieces whom I love and who love me too, I am in fact a deeply lonely woman. Another indication of her boundless hypocrisy was when we were in a relationship, and especially when we corresponded after the breakup, she insolently kept saying that she respected those who valued family and adhered to family values, clearly insinuating that I was not one of them. She clearly showed me the opposite of what she claimed by her way of life. What made her psychopathic was that she sincerely believed what she was saying. She valued and wanted a family, a man she loved all the time, and who would love her back too, as well as all her relatives, and certainly would not cheat on her. I, by the way, was the closest thing to such. I think that even Irka would not deny it. She herself wrote to me, "It was good time after all we had." When I asked her why she decided to break up then, since she was so happy with me, and she honestly wrote that she was scared of my daughter. When she saw how eager my daughter was to go with me, she was ready to leave her sick cat Jenny when I was going to visit my sick mother. Yes, she said. I snapped. She broke up with Arkady too on suspicion of cheating. She caught him talking on the phone with some woman at the same time when she, meeting with him, was also meeting with that young Karachai man. And it all went perfectly well in her head. I wonder if I'll ever know the reason why you, who grew up in love and prosperity in a well-to-do and rich family, have become like that. I will end this chapter with this summary or epilogue, whichever works for you. She turned out to be a textbook whore. She even wore makeup and dresses and fucked like a whore, and she loved sex in all its forms, with whomever she wanted to have it, wherever she wanted it, from the grotto of Diana in Pyatigorsk to the city cemetery at midnight. A romantic kind of a whore with whom you, of course, get high at first, but you get a lot of grief in the end. So she also happened to be a MILF. I have carefully analyzed what she had told and written to me only. She had at least 3 young lovers, sonnies who were 15, 17, and 20 years younger than her. Well, you already know about her Sergei the Sugar Daddy. In general, I alone counted 13 men before me with whom she had more or less long-term relationships. In general, I alone counted 13 men before me with whom she had more or less long-term relationships. Of course, this was just the tip of the iceberg. She had many more. She's always been sort of sluttish girl, even when she was young. She had been good with some, not so good with others. The one she liked she stayed with, but only until she found someone else and was in no hurry to end an old relationship. You don't go barefoot for new shoes, she said. According to my senses, she had at least 30 of them. She'd better get an education, stupid, when it was easier for her, especially with the powerful sugar daddy Sergei she had. She would have had more opportunities to party, get laid that is, in the sessions, and she would probably have made useful acquaintances, which would certainly have come in handy, and she would have had a perspective and a better future, where she would not have had to wear out her beautiful appearance, which she was so lucky to be born with hard work on the assembly line. She always had her hang-ups about not having higher education, especially knowing her potential and intelligence she always had. Unstable, if at times adventurous sex didn't help her appearance either, despite her incredible margin of safety and the excellent genes given to her by her parents. That's how my struggle with long-term depression after Indonesia led me to the fact that I almost left my wife, who was not a whore, for a slut, the most beautiful one's classmate. By the way, I don't know if it has anything to do with her exploits, but her adult children are still not getting married. The older one at least had a girl when I was seeing her, while the younger one, the one who drunk kicked me out of the apartment, handsome as she was, has not been seen with anyone in my 4 years of relationship with her. And he, for a minute, was over 30 years old. If she could not hide the whoring from me, it was unlikely that she was able to do so for many years with her sons, especially the eldest, the shrewd one, remembering how she'd blab out things to me. He was the first to notice that his mom was deep in love, long before she even introduced me to them. It is possible that they are traumatized by this, and they see all girls as potential cheaters and whores. I guess I was lucky I left before I found out all this stuff about her. I had been tormented by a burning desire to kill her for a long time. I thought it was the only way to cleanse myself of the filth she had put me in. If I were in town, I could kill her, especially since we didn't live far from each other. At the time of writing the chapter, I still had that desire. I'm struggling with it, and I comfort myself with the fact that she has to live with it too. You can't run away from yourself. True, she has nothing to be proud of. She had great looks and intelligence, which she stupidly fucked up. She had nothing else to be proud of, neither herself nor her kids. So she went from a girl who had good potential since high school to a provincial, if not marginal slut. It all ended up bad, both for her and me. She, after all, was not a snark like most of her friends. She surrounded herself in such a way as to stand out among them. She, on the contrary, had something aristocratic. She had all the makings to succeed as a person. That's the illusion I had with her, and that kind of awakening I have now. The ship's captain, Oleg, probably was the most successful and the richest in our class, and was the most insecure. I had noticed that it's typical for racists or nationalists like him to be insecure. I guess it's the insecurity, and Oleg was not a good-looking boy, and he was short. On the one hand, that motivated him for his rapid career growth. On the other hand, it led to all sorts of extremist beliefs he had. I decided to give Oleg one last blow to perpetuate his obsessions, to destroy whatever warm feelings he might still have towards her. Let him find out everything about Irka, his first love. His princesses didn't poop, and this one not only pooped but also fucked in the ass. And in fact, among her exes were men he, as a racist and nationalist, didn't even consider people. He would call them, like this Karachai boy, a skibby. I think I succeeded. Even though he banned me for all eternity for that, I didn't give a fuck about that. That's how this story ended, or did it? The woman of my dreams turned into a woman without a name, into a done one to the world. Oh, how long she didn't let me go after we broke up, even after we stopped all communication between us. I understand now how toxic, how psychopathic our relationship with her was from the very beginning to the very end. That's what happens when two narcissists, two psychopaths meet.